Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, June 16th, 2024. I am pleased to be here in Dublin, Ireland, once again for the third annual Longevity Summit Dublin, which is being hosted by Longevity Events Limited in partnership with LEVF, the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, of which I am also proud to be the treasurer. And we have today several notable guests from Longevity Summit Dublin. We have also recorded interviews with several other attendees. First of all, from the U.S. Transhumanist Party from the U.S., joining us are our Director of Visual Art and current Vice Chairman, Art Ramon Garcia, as well as our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg. And joining us from Dublin, Ireland, are David Wood, who is the Executive Director of LEVF, as well as the founder of London Futurists. And we also have our friend Didier Coeurnelle from AFT Techno Prague and from HEALS. And Didier was also one of the speakers at Longevity Summit Dublin just earlier today. Furthermore, we have Victor Björk, who is a longevity consultant and a previous guest of ours. If you haven't seen our Virtual Enlightenment Salon with Victor now more than 3 years ago on June 13th, 2021, please do check it out. But first, I would like to ask David Wood for his impressions of Longevity Summit Dublin this year and any noteworthy presentations or ideas that resonated with him. David, please go ahead.
Thanks very much. This was an extraordinary 4 days, I have to say. Lots of news, lots of progress as well. So some of the talks, I've seen earlier versions of them in previous years, but in all cases, there was more news closer to clinical trials with various compounds, companies evolving, pivoting from something that initially had seemed to work and then had given some problems, and they were pivoting to something which had more reason to be successful. The sessions started before 9 o'clock in the morning. 8:30, I think, was the target, and continued till after 6. So there was lots and lots to choose from. And if I pick out a few, I'm inevitably going to miss out a great deal. That was also meritorious. But let me pick maybe 3 themes, which I think some particularly striking. The first was animal superagers. And the reason I like this theme is I think it's a narrative that members of the general public can relatively easily get behind before they get lost in discussions about, well, if there was a solution to aging, there might be overpopulation or something like that. They can easily engage instead in the details of the fascinating lives of some very long-lived animals. So we had a talk, for example, about a species of fish which I'd only heard a little bit about before, called the buffalo fish, which is a little bit like a carp, but something separate. And what's remarkable about these fish, which can be found in various inland freshwaters in North America, is that we're fairly sure, by a number of reasons, that many of them are over 100 years old. And sometimes people shrug and say, well, it's true, some water creatures do live long lives, but that's only because they're living in very cold and deep surroundings. And if it's very cold and very deep, then life slows down. But that's not at all the case with these buffalo fish. They live in shallow water, they live in warm water, and it's quite remarkable what they were doing. So that was a fascinating discussion. Another creature we heard about was bats. Lots and lots of bats, different species. And sometimes people say, all creatures have the same sort of number of beats of the heart. And so some creatures have slow beating hearts, and that's why they live longer, and other creatures have fast beating hearts and they live shorter. But that's completely invalidated, first of all, by birds, many of whom have fast beating hearts and live 6 decades or more. It is certainly invalidated by bats. And we heard from Emma Teeling, a researcher in Dublin, who has spent, she said, probably 30 years of her life investigating the long-lived species of bats and how they managed to do it. So that was fascinating as well. And bats are remarkable, not just because they have mechanisms to help them live long, even at a high temperature, but they have mechanisms to fight off viral infections. Now, bats are sometimes notorious as the origins of many viruses that cross species and infect humans. Well, the other thing to say about bats is they often coexist with viruses. And if you try to inflict new viruses onto bats, they get the viruses, they have a high viral load, but they don't get ill as a result. They don't get inflamed. So people are studying like crazy. And the reason to study these super long-lived animals is that we can find out how nature has achieved this, long-lived animals in various ways, and we can copy some of the mechanisms. Perhaps the most famous long-lived animal is the naked mole rat, which is a eusocial animal, lives in burrows under the ground, and there is typically one queen, and all the other females are infertile. But what we learned in that particular talk was that the naked mole rat probably has at least 7 different mechanisms compared to humans that allows it to fight off the normal hallmarks of aging. So people have often pointed out things about its hyaluronic acid in the extracellular matrix of its skin. That's one. People have pointed out its mechanisms to fight off cancer. Well, it seems that these creatures have at least 7 different mechanisms, which is remarkable. And again, we can learn. And the last animal I'll mention isn't yet a long-lived animal. It's the domestic cat. And the reason I mention this is there's a startup created by 2 people, each called Alex, each aged about 30, each with already a good track record. They both admit to loving their cats very much. They say there's been a number of startups targeting long-lived dogs, and they have ideas for how to allow middle-aged cats to be given a new lease of life. And they've studied this quite carefully. To bring a treatment to cats requires some veterinary approvals. There are regulations, but they're nothing like so arduous as bringing a treatment to humans. So they think that with a favorable wind, and they already have some significant funding behind them, with a favorable wind, they could be in what's known as conditional approval with their therapies within 18 months. And then they will have another 5 years to demonstrate that there are no significant adverse problems. So it could be that within a couple of years or 30 months, there will already be cat owners who are delighted that their cats have a new lease of life. So that's theme number 1. I might pick out super aging animals. Briefly, theme number 2 I might pick out is, we can call it nanoparticles. Now, many of us in the transhumanist world have long looked forward to what we imagine would be nanotechnology. There would be Drexlerian, named after Eric Drexler, Drexlerian factories and nanosurgery and such like. And much of that hasn't happened. But I saw 2 fascinating talks, each in different kinds of nanoparticles, particles that had been assembled by what's known as click chemistry, which is a way of assembling something remarkably different. So one was a talk by a company called Nanotics, and they have a 4-layer nanoparticle that can be programmed to take out of the bloodstream something called signaling molecules. So they have a whole theory that many diseases are caused not by what goes wrong inside individual cells, but what goes wrong inside the signaling between cells. And this is sometimes called the signalome. And Nanotics have been working for quite a number of years, and their progress is coming along very impressively on mechanisms to remove some of the mistakes in the immune system, which lead to a whole number of diseases. So that was impressive, but it wasn't the only nanoparticle that caught my attention. There's a company called Ocean Technologies, which actually was a spin-out from SENS quite a while ago. And initially they targeted senolytics, and they've had some promising results from their senolytics. But what they have also done is they have realized that some of their methods, which they were developing, can be much more widely applicable. And the speaker there, Matthew Schultz, the CEO of Ocean Technologies, he talked about the possibility to have a different delivery mechanism for changing some of our genetic makeup. So we currently often have a choice between some viral vectors and the liquid nanoparticles, but there are drawbacks of both, Matthew explained. And they have a different kind of nanoparticle, which is called a fusogenic lipid nanoparticle, which allows more precise targeting. So again, it's using the latest ideas of chemistry, and they had a whole number of ideas for how this could work out. So finally, before I hand back the microphone, otherwise I will speak all day about the fascinating talks over 4 days. The third theme I'll pick out is artificial intelligence for longevity treatments. We had a great talk first thing in the morning by Ben Gutzel about some of the things Singularity Net's spin-outs are doing. That is different companies there. But the one that really caught my attention was a progress report by Alex Zavaronkov in silico medicine. And they have made very significant progress with now 2 drugs discovered by their AI mechanisms. 2 drugs are now in phase 2 trials with humans and a whole number of others. What they are doing is they are shortcutting the process of drug discovery, which has got far too long, far too complicated. Too many drugs get bogged down earlier in that mechanism, in that long series of trials and tests. And with a whole variety of different kinds of AIs, Alex sometimes describes it as a zoo of AI, generative AIs, and so on. They're able to come up with hypotheses for what targets in the molecular machinery, biomolecular machinery, should be addressed by interventions in order to deal with various diseases, and then what molecules can be created. So it's not like imagining a picture in response to a prompt, it's imagining a molecule in response to a prompt. And they can come up with things which then can more reliably go through the trials more quickly. So Alex has gone on from leaps and bounds from when I first met him nearly 15 years ago. So these are 3 themes which caught my attention, but there's at least 10 other themes. In each case, I was impressed at the progress, and the audience, I could tell, was impressed too, as often came up during the quite extensive networking. So these are some opening thoughts from myself, trying to convey some of the excitement and the inspiration which I had picked up at the conference.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David, for that thorough and succinct overview. I think you definitely touched on many of the major themes at Longevity Summit Dublin, and there will be a few others that we will explore throughout this salon. I will also add that just before he left, Alex Zavaronkov interviewed me for about 5 minutes, and this is part of his own podcast. So hopefully that interview will be coming out in the not too distant future. And I will also point out, for those who would like to know more about the Cat Health Company and its efforts, we did interview one of its co-founders, Alexandru Voda, on April 10th, 2022. So please check out our virtual enlightenment salon with him. And now I would like to go to Didier Coeurnelle of Heels and AFT Techno Prague. He was one of the speakers at Longevity Summit Dublin just earlier today, and he spoke about challenges with health data and some of the obstacles that current legislation, especially in the European Union, would pose to the use of such health data for longevity research and scientific research more generally. So Didier, are you able to share some of your remarks and impressions at this time?
Yes, I will. I will try. I don't know how good is the sound because I cannot hear you so good, but I suppose you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, I think David made a great summary. It was 4 very, very interesting days with a diversity of speakers and with the opportunity to meet many people that I already met and also many people I never met. Yes, I was speaking, like you said, about sharing of health data. For me, that is one of the, let's say, fascinating and sometimes a bit depressing aspect of modern technologies. It makes it possible to, it makes it theoretically possible and easy to share data. But it makes it also possible and easy not to share health data and to protect it for IP reasons, for privacy reasons. And I spoke, among other things, about big multinational American company who is called IQVI and who has a lot of health data but doesn't share it. So that was my intervention today. What can I say? I'm sorry, I'm in the airport and it. I had difficulties to find a place to be more or less cool. I think David, for me the most probably the most impressive discussion was about this buffalo fishes who really seem not to age and who even more than that seem to be kind of having less fragility when they age than before. So it's very, very interesting. And I think that I will organize, and maybe actually we could organize here, I don't know, conference, a small conference with the guy who was speaking. And on an other team, for during the 4 days I had, they were like in many other places, quite a few discussions concerning artificial intelligence. And I hope that we will be able to organize during the next Dublin conference one workshop only about this, and also in the next months. So that's it for the moment. Yeah, I will let the other participants
All right.
speak.
Thank you very much, Didier. We appreciate your remarks as well. And in terms of buffalo fish, yes, this was quite new information for the vast majority of the attendees at the summit. The researcher who presented it is Professor Alec Lackman. You can look him up here via his faculty profile at the University of Minnesota. And I also have various follow-up questions that I hope to ask him in the not too distant future. One other key subject area that was discussed at the Longevity Summit, and indeed there was a succession of presentations on it, is the exceptional longevity of supercentenarians. So there were presenters from the Gerontology Research Group, from LongeviQuest, and also from Natalie Coles, who is a long-time collector of biomarker data from supercentenarians. So she actually goes to visit them and collect, for instance, blood samples and other data about their health characteristics to enable us to try to figure out what is it that could account for their exceptional longevity. And another individual who was present at the Longevity Summit, who is an expert on supercentenarians himself, is our friend Victor Björk. And I was quite pleased to be able to follow up with Victor regarding everything that has happened for him during the 3 years since our prior virtual enlightenment salon. And now I will play the interview that I did with Victor. Please prepare any questions that you might have for him, because he will be available after that interview to respond to them. So, Victor, it is good to speak with you again. Of course, you have been our guest for a prior virtual enlightenment salon back in 2021, and we also helped you with the Victor Run virtual race when you were raising funds for your stay at iCore Therapeutics in New York. So now you are a longevity consultant. So tell us about how you made that transition and what your work involves.
Thank you very much, Gennady. So, as many of you know, I have been very involved in this field for a very long time, and I decided to dedicate my career to understand and create impact in this field. So, a bit briefly, after that I worked at iCore, I proceeded and moved to Switzerland, and I moved and I worked there as a business developer, where I helped find potentially interesting companies. And after a year there, I moved on and I set up my own business, where I help funds in space to understand specific challenges like scientific due diligence, landscaping, interesting areas, and also I help private individuals who are interested in the field to understand specific challenges and avoid being fooled by all the snake oil that also exists. So it is a very enjoyable experience, and it was actually a bit of a coincidence that I managed to get multiple clients at once, and I set up my own company, and I moved to the Mediterranean island Malta, which I very much enjoy. So I'm lucky to be able to work with my interests.
Yes, and you are a great example of an individual who has been able to make a living in the longevity field as a self-employed person, and that is really quite remarkable. What would you say is the skill set and the pathway that led you there, in terms of what needed to happen in order for you to have a career like this?
First of all, the basics is that you have some kind of degree, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a scientific degree. In my case, I'm a molecular biologist. I actually started out with medical school, but I didn't want to work as a doctor, so I want to work as a scientist. But then I thought about how do I position myself to create the maximum amount of impact in the field. So that is always in the back of my mind, to think in that targeted way. And if you are very, very passionate about something, that usually shines through, and you will be able to get clients and people who will support you. So there are multiple ways. There's not one size fits all. So.
Yes, and certainly for people who are interested in doing something like this, they will need to figure out what their skill set is and how they can forge their own path. But in the meantime, the longevity field itself has evolved. How would you characterize the major changes that have occurred in the past several years, especially since we last spoke in 2021?
Yeah, for past several years, if we start including like a 7 to 10 year horizon as well, then it gets very interesting, because most of the field has really appeared since then. It has gone from fringe to almost mainstream in that regard, and there's a lot of capital coming into it right now, and even the COVID pandemic did not crush the interest, and I do think many new areas have opened up that we didn't think of before. It was not until 2011 that we knew that you could rejuvenate mice by removing senescent cells, and now that has really emerged into a large biotech area with very, very serious people involved. So in the cellular programming, as they have been speaking about today as well, it's very interesting what you can actually do. We don't know the path to the clinic, but we know a lot of fundamental science is known, so we can actually charter and understand aging in a way that was not possible before. Because if you said cure aging 50 years ago, that was really a fringe thing, not only because of how it was perceived, but because you didn't have the molecular tools to do anything. But now we have so many techniques, CRISPR, all the lab probe tissues and cells, and we understand what's going on, AI. So now it's not as ridiculous anymore to think that we can do a lot when it comes to health span and lifespan for us.
Yes, indeed. And hopefully that perception that we can do a lot will continue to spread, because that ultimately is what will continue to support this industry and the research. Now, you said one of your activities as a consultant is to help your clients distinguish between legitimate research and snake oil. And how do you help them identify the differences? What do you look for in terms of both promising signs and red flags?
You have to be really good at reading scientific papers carefully, and you have to understand the common flaws and distinguish marketing and hype from what is actually reality. But you can't be overly cautious either, because then you would end up doing nothing in that regard. So you have to strike a balance between everything from safety to credibility, what works, what doesn't work, what is something that is plausible enough that you can tell that this is an actionable thing to do, whether it's an investment or implementation of a lifestyle change. You have to find that balance, and that's a very large area. You have to constantly read new scientific papers and stay on top of things to be able to do that in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Now, one of the areas of interest that you've cultivated and made part of your extensive knowledge base is the study of supercentenarians, and you've met many of them. You've met Emma Morano, who used to be the oldest person on Earth when you met her, and we had an interesting discussion a couple of days ago about the attributes of these supercentenarians and what some of the commonalities are. One of the comments that you mentioned is essentially most people die because of something that is their weakest link, and they could be fairly well off in terms of their other attributes, and somehow these supercentenarians have avoided, at least longer than others, being killed by their weakest link. So could you talk a bit more about that?
Yes, indeed. So humans age at roughly similar rates, but the rates are not exactly identical. And we have the hallmarks of aging, whether you say it's 9 hallmarks or 12 hallmarks or even more, they feed back upon each other. So when one thing goes wrong, other things snap as well. So in order to become a supercentenarian, you would need to age slowly in a rather coherent way across multiple tissues, but also not have a particular link. So I think, for example, the slowest aging person in the world on a molecular level might have died at 80 because of a weak link, rather than move on to. So the question is, if you would measure aging, it's really how long would you live if you live to the most frail state possible without hitting a particular end point that causes death. But it's a very interesting area, because when it comes to lifestyle, we know that not being overweight and not smoking gives you a much better chance of living to 90. But when it comes to supercentenarian, it's less clear often what actually caused them to live that long, and it can't be often down to a single gene either so far. So it's interesting.
So it's essentially that they've avoided catastrophic failure in their organism from every single possible source of their failure. They're still aging and they can still be very frail, but it's just that no system has critically failed enough to kill them.
Exactly. So in a sense, rather than thinking of them as like positively enhanced with a very specific gene or something, you can think of them as abnormally normal. Think of, if you want somebody who just functions normally and abnormally well, then you will end up living a very long time. And that's also when you look at the phenotype. They're more females than men, for example, but there's no very distinct. It doesn't. There's no ethnicity that prevents you from reaching 110, and there's no particular phenotype. It's not like in mice where you have the Ames dwarf mouse. There is a mutant that lives very long. but the supercentenarians can be of average height and average appearance. There's no just that correct balance of not having a catastrophic event and not having anything particularly wrong with them. So abnormally normal rather than enhanced in a particular way.
This is very interesting, and actually this discussion has led me to an insight that could guide a lot of people in their lives. So, of course, in order to be successful, one has to have a talent or an activity where one excels to a significant extent, more so than the rest. And for instance, for you, it would be your knowledge of the longevity field, because you're able to deploy that into your career and you're focusing on that. And each one of us has a talent like that we could develop to the maximum. And we also need to avoid these catastrophic sources of failure that could literally kill us. And we need to mind each other aspect of our lives to the extent that it won't kill us. But we don't have to correct every single minor flaw, and we don't have to strive for perfection or excellence in everything. Like, not everybody needs to be a super athlete. Not everybody needs to excel in every academic discipline or even, say, every social skill. They just have to be good enough not to fail catastrophically at it. So what do you think of that approach as a way of maximizing longevity and also still being successful in life without stressing about it too much?
Yes, I think that is a very, very good point, and something that distinguishes people who are centenarians is that they often have a strong purpose in life. It's not very easy to quantify by probing their blood or something, but they tend to have low stress levels. They tend to not worry about minor things, even if they had a life that seemed harder towards an outsider. They have not internalized it. Yes, indeed. As for longevity, you're only as strong as your weakest link, so you can live a really long time even if you have not optimized every cell of your body in that regard. So that's a very good point.
Yes, indeed. And I think for most of our viewers, this will give them hope. Most people are not going to become super optimized in every respect, but they don't have to be. They just have to pay attention to their health and make sure that nothing fails critically. So thank you for that. I also wanted to get your thoughts about Longevity Summit Dublin so far. We've had 2 days of the summit as of this recording. What are your impressions?
I am very pleased to see that the movement continues to grow, and apart from the people who tend to go to a lot of conferences, you also see a lot of fresh faces here from different disciplines, and that's when you have this cross-pollination of ideas, you really can grow the community. So it's very interesting.
Yes, indeed. It has certainly been, and we look forward to the remainder of the event.
I think that you should try to understand how you can make a contribution. What can I do to help with my little piece of this global movement to accelerate important science? You don't have to be a scientist, but you can be a communicator, or there's so many other things that you can do. So whatever thing that you feel that you can do, reach out, and you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Gennady, but think about what can I do to help out and speed up progress.
Yes, indeed. What can one do to help out? Very important question. Thank you very much, Victor, for your time, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of Longevity Summit Dublin.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, excellent. So that was Victor Björk, and now he has joined us live. Thank you for being with us, Victor. We do have a question for you from our friend Alan Crowley. So Victor wonders, who are your main customers? How do you consult? Upon what topics? And have you considered working with city or state leadership? So feel free to address these in turn.
Yes, indeed. So I have both private individuals who are interested in longevity, who come to me to understand where the science is currently. So I function as an independent consultant. If you want to visit clinic or a particular MD, I can provide independent evaluation of scientific claims that they make, and also what supplements that are evidence-based and not, and cutting-edge medicines that have a solid scientific data in mice versus not. And I also can provide people with investment advice, look at different companies. So I've helped out some funds as well in the space. So everything from a very personal approach to an investment approach. And I consult. It depends very much on who I am doing. Usually I work on a retainer basis, so a fixed amount of hours. Sometimes I can do some individual hours if somebody just has a very limited specific thing. If I would consider working with city or state leadership, yes, I will definitely be open to that. I'm very broad in my knowledge, and I'm very broad in who I am willing to work with in that regard. So.
Yes, thank you very much, Victor. And for those who are interested in finding out more about Victor's consulting services, check out his website, Victor Björk, Gero Consulting. Alan does have a follow-up question. He wonders, do you have a newsletter?
Yes, I have a very popular newsletter on LinkedIn that I publish. So check out my LinkedIn page. I have many thousands of followers there, and I regularly try to be ahead with the new updates on everything from conferences to scientific breakthroughs and so on. So.
Yes, indeed. And I just posted the link to Victor's LinkedIn profile right here. You could also find it in our YouTube chat. Please do check it out. I regularly read Victor's posts from his newsletter. I find them to be insightful, and I find them to provide the kind of perspective into the longevity industry that is difficult to find elsewhere, just because Victor has seen so many different organizations and has followed various recent trends, but also his knowledge base is extensive since he has worked in this field for several decades now, and he has worked as a researcher as well, which I think distinguishes him from a typical management consultant, for instance. He really knows this subject matter. So thank you very much, Victor. And we have a comment from London Futurists. There were two octogenarians attending the summit, one male, one female. The male was 81, the female was 86, who both gave the impression of being much younger than their chronological ages, dancing in a sprightly way. And thank you, David, for sharing that. Rudy Hoffman does write that what is worrisome and depressing is that none of these centenarians, and I would say this is true for the super centenarians, the ones past 110, are running marathons or doing the kind of youthful activities that most of us would like as health extenders. He wonders, is he wrong in that? There have been some post 100-year-old people who have run marathons. I don't think anyone past the age of 110 has run an extended distance. But David, please go ahead with your thoughts. Yes, I just unmuted you.
On this point, there have been some very interesting studies. Near Barzilai in New York has studied the community of superagers based around New York. And what I learned at the conference is that there have been similar studies in Leiden in Holland and also in Poland of not just individual superagers, but small families of superagers. So there was one photograph of 4 sisters in Leiden in Holland, each of whom were over 90 years old, and all of them were pretty healthy. So it is the case that some people who are much older than the norm, they don't just live longer, they are healthy for longer. And given that they are in these family groups, where in some cases the quality of lifestyle isn't so great, we have to say. Some of these families of superagers included people who smoked a lot or who didn't eat much vegetables, famously. So there must have been a strong genetic component, we would think. And indeed, there are other signs that you can live healthily. And one photograph that was shown by Natalie Cole had Britain's second oldest man, who is 110 or maybe 111. He was actually standing up unaided. So most of the time he sits down, to be clear, but he did have enough energy to make a few steps completely unaided. So there is some good life, quality of life for some of these super ages. So we can learn not just what allowed them to have so many candles on their cake, but what gave them the health characteristics of maybe a 60-year-old when they were in their 90s. And it seems there's not one gene that has that result. Just as nature provides many different animals with different ways to live much longer, and we have to investigate each of them to see how applicable the mechanisms might be to introduce into humans. In the same way, it looks like different parts around the world have discovered different mechanisms whereby these super agers in small local groups can live significantly longer than the norm in this healthy state. At one stage, it was thought, well, we'll study this and we'll find one gene which makes all the difference. And there are some genes that show up again and again. There's something called FOXO3, which I think is involved in the insulin growth signaling, growth factor signaling. I can't remember the details. So there are one or two that come up quite often, but the likelihood is that there may be dozens or even scores of separate genetic mechanisms to be discovered by this.
Yes,
so we just started looking, and we should look a lot more.
Yes, thank you very much, David. And I definitely appreciate that perspective. Also, here's an article about the oldest known marathon runner, Fauja Singh, who ran a full marathon at the age of 100. This is an article from the official Olympics website. He is nicknamed the Turbaned Tornado. And if you can see a picture of him on that article, he definitely looks much younger and healthier than a typical 100-year-old. I would like Victor to opine on this. So is it the case that most of these super centenarians were indeed able to be physically active and vigorous far longer than people typically would be, and their decline tended to happen fairly late in their lives, like in their 100s or 110s?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. On average, of course, there's some people who are able to survive very long in what we would call a frail state. Now, supercentenarians have not been mapped molecularly, so we don't know exactly how they are aging slower than the average human. We would need really good digital twins to figure that out. But we can at least get some rough approximation with so-called ADL scores, which means activities for daily living, which is, of course, what physiologically separates people from being able to function independently and being in a nursing home, because that's not really molecular aging. It's how the molecular aging impairs physiology. So, but on average, people who live to 110 tend to be independent until the age of about 100 to 105, and then after 105, they have a severe enough limitations that they need care, either full care or partial care on average. There have been a few instances of people living completely independently to over 110 and even driving a car, but these people have not lived that much longer after that, despite that health. But it's very clear that if you compare the average 80-year-old who is going to live to 115 versus the average 80-year-old, you will definitely be able to easily point that out. A child could point that out. It's obvious enough for that. So.
Yes, indeed. So supercentenarians do live longer in good health. However, and I think this is extremely important, they do still decline eventually, and indeed at a fairly predictable rate, because aging still affects them. And we highly encourage good lifestyle practices here at the U.S. Transhumanist Party, but it's important to note none of today's good lifestyle practices or none of the genetic luck that these supercentenarians have right now will make them live to 150 or even 130. For that, we need advances in biomedical science in rejuvenation. So thank you very much, Victor, for your insights. Daniel Tweed jokes, does longevity consulting typically come with a lifetime warranty? So I think that's a bit humorous, but do you want to say anything on that, Victor?
It would be good if it came with that, I guess. There's something I should market, maybe.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. So I am going to play our next interview, which is with a good friend of ours and our foreign ambassador in Spain, Dr. Jose Cordeiro. I met up with him also in the evening of the second day of Longevity Summit Dublin, and he was quite enthusiastic about several key developments that he will mention to us just now. So here is Dr. Jose Cordeiro. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here at Longevity Summit Dublin with our friend and U.S. Transhumanist Party Foreign Ambassador from Spain, Dr. Jose Cordeiro. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you, Gennady. We are having this fantastic conference here in Ireland to promote immortality.
Yes, indeed. We are both immortalists, and there are many who think like us here, and you have your book, The Death of Death, in Spanish and in German, and on your tie.
Yes, yeah, the tie goes with the book. I also have it in English, in Chinese, in Russian, in Italian, in Korean, Japanese, and here in German, which is, they changed the title. In German, it means the victory over death.
Yes, the victory over death. May it be achieved soon. So,
Yes.
Jose, you were telling me before that you spoke with Ray Kurzweil recently, and his book, The Singularity is Nearer, is coming out. But Ray Kurzweil has remained convinced that longevity escape velocity will be reached in 5 to 6 years by 2029 or 2030. What reasons does he give for this view?
Well, I love Ray, and I have known Ray for over 30 years, since I went to MIT, and he gave lectures at MIT. So he's fantastic. He has been right about 80+% of his projections over half a century. He's better than Rasputin. Forget about Rasputin or Nostradamus. Total horrible. Ray Kurzweil is incredible for predicting the future. And in his new book, The Singularity is Nearer, he talks about reaching longevity escape velocity between 2029 and 2030. And he is 76 years old. I mean, he's not a baby. He's 76 years old. And he talks about how artificial intelligence is coming to save us. Artificial intelligence will be able to sequence and understand the human genome, all diseases, and help us to find how to stop aging, how to reverse aging. So I think it's incredible. I wrote to him, he sent me the manuscript of his book before, and I said, are you sure that we can reach longevity escape velocity between 29 and 2030? And he said, yes, and I will not move my prediction, and I am convinced this is going to happen, and I am convinced that I will not die. This is so incredible, incredible. You know, Ray Kurzweil, a visionary, a fantastic guy, MIT, Singularity University, best-selling books, and he says he does not plan to die.
And I certainly hope that he is correct, because that will mean we will not have to die. And
absolutely, because we're younger than him.
Yes, yes. So it's interesting because some significant advances in artificial intelligence would need to occur between now and then for that to happen. We've had some remarkable advances in large language models and generative AI, but those systems are still not sufficient to really understand biology or mathematics to the extent that would be needed to identify viable approaches for reversing senescence. So does Ray think a new paradigm of artificial intelligence is just around the corner?
Yes, yes, and yes. Even generative AI is new. You know, this is like 3 years old. It didn't exist before, and now it is wow, you can actually predict what might happen because of this generative AI. But now more will come. Actually, intelligent artificial intelligence, because generative AI, finds what has happened in the past and makes a prediction. But we will have really intelligent artificial intelligence, and it will be able to understand what we cannot. Like the human genome. The human genome is big, it's 3 gigabytes of data. We have 23,000 genes. We humans, we have a limited brain, small brain. Artificial intelligence has no limits. So yes, AI will help us to become immortal.
Yes, I certainly hope so. Now, you have said before that what you are afraid of is not artificial intelligence, but human stupidity. And there are a lot of people today who are afraid of artificial intelligence, and some of them provide some reasoning behind it. Others are just fearful and reactionary. But my question to you is, in the race between artificial intelligence and human stupidity, which side is winning right now?
Well, I think artificial intelligence will win, but we will be merged. We will be fused with artificial intelligence. My professor at MIT, Marvin Minsky, one of the fathers of artificial intelligence, he said that we will merge with artificial intelligence. We will become more intelligent. We will use this artificial intelligence to become better human beings. And actually, technology is what makes us different from animals. We are animals with technology, and now we are animals with artificial intelligence. So I am so excited. We are going to be incredible things. And as Ray Kurzweil says, and here in my book, The Death of Death, we will reach longevity escape velocity in 2030. So don't die before 2030, because we will be able to rejuvenate you by then, in 6 years. So this is the best time to be alive and to remain alive. We're between the last mortal generation and the first immortal generation. So, Gennady, what do you want to be?
Yes, I definitely want to be part of, well, perhaps the second or third immortal generation, because I want people who are 50 years older than I am, or even older than that, to make it to longevity escape velocity. But yes, I definitely want to be there with them. But Jose, you had a recent parliamentary election where you ran for the European Union Parliament on behalf of the Future Party in Spain. So could you tell us more about that?
Yes, and thank you for asking that. Indeed, on June 9th, we had elections in Europe for the European Parliament. And we had 2 longevity parties, one in Germany and one in Spain. And we were campaigning for biological rejuvenation, for creating an agency for rejuvenation in Europe, because Europe is getting old and older, and we are aging fast, and there are no children. It's actually very sad. There is not a new generation in many European countries. Anyway, so I'm happy to tell you I had 6,000 votes in Spain, and I can also tell you I don't have 6,000 friends in Madrid. So I got a lot of votes. In Germany also, they were close to 19,000 votes, which is a lot of votes. Not enough to become members of the European Parliament, but it is a good beginning, a fantastic beginning. And this movement is growing in Germany, in Spain, and soon in many other countries of the European Union. And so, for the next European election, which is in 5 years, we hope to have some members of the Parliament working on rejuvenation.
Yes, that would be a tremendous achievement, and it would greatly aid the visibility of the longevity cause as well as the transhumanist movement. Now, I think all of these votes were hard-earned, and many of the people who voted for you or for the Party for Biomedical Rejuvenation Research are people who were introduced to these ideas by these campaigns. So we definitely applaud you for that extensive outreach that you performed. Now, another way of getting people informed about longevity and the possibilities is through events like this one, Longevity Summit Dublin. So I wanted to ask you, what are your impressions of the summit thus far at the end of the second day?
Well, fantastic. The Longevity Summit Dublin is the place for you to come if you don't want to die. If you want to die, don't come. Don't come here. This is a great place with great science, with the latest achievements in science, what is happening in epigenetic reprogramming, what is happening in stem cell therapies, gene therapies, CRISPR. All of this you will find out here in Dublin. So I'm very excited and happy to be part of this movement that is growing exponentially. And so in 5 years, we do want to change the world. In 5 years, Ray Kurzweil might be right. And we will have reached longevity escape velocity, which basically means immortality in the sense that we will live long enough to live forever. But aging, still aging, until the year 2045. That is the magic year when, according to Ray, we will have biological rejuvenation. So two important dates, 2030 and 2045. 2030 to reach longevity escape velocity, and the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, which was founded by Aubrey de Grey, is working towards that now with mice, with the Robust Mouse Rejuvenation Prize. This is a fantastic experiment because mice and humans, we share 90% of the genome. Yes, you, me, we are similar to mice, 90%. Anyway, so if we can make mice live longer and longer and longer, we will do this with humans. So that's by 2030. And then rejuvenation, which is the important part. We will become younger and younger. It's not that we are going to be immortally old. No, we are going to be immortally young.
Yes, and that is such a wonderful future to look forward to. I certainly hope that Ray is right and that we are on the cusp of these advances, but they won't happen automatically. They take hard work from all of the scientists, all of the technologists, all of the advocates like you, Jose, who have been at work tirelessly for decades, supporting the longevity cause, spreading the word about it, writing books. So I would encourage everyone to get The Death of Death in the language of your choice. It's available in English now as well. And I hope that we can all live long and prosper.
Absolutely. I always say that, live long and prosper. I am a fan of Star Trek, and I think we are going to begin colonizing the galaxy. It's so beautiful. Elon Musk says it. We are the last uniplanetary civilization. We are becoming a multi-planetary civilization, and this is incredible because the first Martians will be humans. We will be the first Martians. So this is fantastic. I mean, the future is so beautiful, and I want to be there, and you should be there too.
Let's build it together. Thank you very much, Jose.
A pleasure.
Indeed, it was a pleasure to hear from Dr. Jose Cordeiro, and he gave quite a spirited set of remarks earlier today as well. I wanted to follow up on Jose's mention of the robust mouse rejuvenation study that is now 16 months underway. And of course, this is Aubrey de Grey's flagship project at the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, and Caitlin Lewis, who is the scientist overseeing the project, provided quite a detailed and eloquent update about the progress at Longevity Summit Dublin. You can also read Aubrey's update. The latest update that was published was on May 7th, 2024. And these are the survival curves that we have right now from this study. I am going to show them briefly. So you can see here for the male mice, there are 10 cohorts. And you can see here at the bottom, the legend that shows what each of these colored lines represent. And you can see that the red line showing the group that received all of the treatments is at, I would say, about 65% survival as of the last recorded data point, whereas the thick blue line showing the group that received none of the treatments, the control group, is below 30% as of the latest update. And when these mice were as old as the mice in the red cohort, this group was only at 40% survival. And we see a similar set of patterns with the females. Now, there are some differences by gender which are notable, and in this strain of mice, the males do actually live longer than the females, but you can see the significant gap between the red cohort and the blue cohort as well. And I would encourage you to explore these graphs and read Aubrey's update as well. And now, David, you would like to discuss the appearance of Peter Diamandis as well as the Healthspan XPrize, which is big news for the longevity community.
Thanks. Well, first, I'd just make a little bit more of a comment about the significance of the RMR1 project. Because one thing that impressed me was the number of people at the conference who clearly understood that this was a breakthrough project in many ways. It was a sea change. Since the approach that Aubrey has been advocating for more than 20 years has up to now been a divide and conquer approach in which different categories of damage of aging have each been analyzed and individual treatments have been proposed and developed and researched for different types of damage. But we're now moving into a phase which Caitlin Lewis described in her presentation as it is now time to combine. In other words, to see how the different treatments, which have each individually been proven when applied to middle-aged mice to extend their remaining lifespan by perhaps 10 or 20%, how do these different treatments react when applied together? And there are different kinds of treatments. So one of the ones of the four is something that is given in the food, rapamycin. There's another one that involves a different kind of treatment altogether, a senolytic. There's another one that is for some mice to extend their telomeres. And there's a fourth as well, which involves the transplant of young hematopoietic stem cells. So 4 different kinds of treatments. And it's very important to understand what kind of crosstalk or what kind of influence there might be between the different treatments. So that's what the project is exploring. And it is generating much more data than you can see just on these graphs. There is lots of data about how the animals look, because you can tell often by looking at them how curved their spine is, how much they can grip as well, and internal organs. So Didier Coeurnelle, who's on this call, is right when he emphasizes we need to collect health data, and this is health data of an unprecedented kind. And Caitlin, I thought, gave a very clear talk about this, and afterwards, everybody that I spoke to, and people often brought it up without me raising the topic first, that this is a project of great significance, and people are looking forward eagerly to when we can do version 2 of the project, which will, as Caitlin explained, probably have up to 6 treatments per mice. And all of the mice, including the controls, in this case, will probably be given rapamycin because it is the single treatment that seems to be the most effective in its own right. We will also put wheels in each cage for the mice because mice do like to run, and when they run, it seems it extends their lifespans as well. And we'll have 4 other treatments. That does depend on funds being raised. And that takes me to the remarks I'd like to come into next, which is sources of funding for significant rejuvenation projects. Peter Diamandis was interviewed at the event. Most of the speakers were present. Just 1 or 2, for various reasons, couldn't make it. And Peter Diamandis was on what he described as the first family holiday he'd had for many years. So he broke away from his holiday and was interviewed by Aubrey as to the XPrize, amongst other things. And the XPrize is the world's largest ever prize. $101 million has been set aside from various sources that I'll describe in a minute in order to attract people to do something which goes beyond what we are doing in RMR. RMR is intended to obviously rejuvenate several different aspects of the mice so that the mice will be protected against aging in various dimensions at the same time. Well, for a company to win either 100 million or 90 million, it depends on how well they do. They have to demonstrate through treatments applied over a 1-year period that the functional strength of your muscles, the functional strength of your immune system, and the functional ability of your brain, your cognitive strength, all three of them have been rejuvenated by 10 years if for the smaller amount of the prize, or by 20 years for the larger amount of the prize. I think this is truly game-changing, and there are large numbers of people who are interested and talking about ideas by which they may win this prize. Now, the prize is set to be awarded, hopefully, in 2030. If it isn't won by 2030, it may continue a little bit longer. Jose Cordeiro was listening carefully to this talk, and he asked a question over the remote system to Peter Diamandis. He said, well, your friend, Ray Kurzweil, who together with Peter Diamandis, the two of them have formed the Singularity University. Ray Kurzweil is convinced in his new book that we will get to longevity escape velocity by 2029, 2030. What do you think, Peter? And Peter, as you might review in due course when you watch the recording, was quite diplomatic. I think what he has in mind is that there are two scenarios. That it could be indeed a rapid improvement in AI, which will accelerate everything. But in case there isn't such a huge improvement in AI in the short term, then we must extrapolate what we can see with today's AI, or incremental improvements on today's AI, and all the other treatments that were being discussed at the Longevity Dublin event. In that case, I think maybe by 2030, we won't have rejuvenated people in all aspects, but we will have the ability, hopefully, to rejuvenate people in many aspects. And that will buy all of us who are still alive then enough time to wait for more treatments to become available in the next 10 years or so. Now, I mentioned the funding for this. It comes from 3 sources. There's 101 million. There is a number of individuals who have put money in themselves, including Peter Diamandis, who put $5 million of his own money up as part of the prize, and many other people put up similar amounts. There was one other successful businessman whose name, unfortunately, I can't remember. He did put up a significant amount of money too, in part because his son is suffering from a premature aging disease. So that has partially motivated him. But the largest amount of money comes from Hevolution. And that's the last thing I'd like to talk to. And then maybe I will ask Victor to comment on Hevolution, because I know Victor has made a special study of what Hevolution are doing. Hevolution is the fund set up from within Saudi Arabia, dedicated to spending more and more money as time passes in support of longevity research. Actually, they don't call it longevity research. They're always quite careful to say increased health span, that people who live longer will have much healthier times as they live longer. So they have set up 2 initiatives. One of them is an investment fund where they will invest with the expectation that at least in some cases there will be a commercial return. But then there's also a grants side in which they make grants to academia and to other places, such as the XPrize, without any expectation of a commercial return. And they've taken a while to get up to the run rate that they said initially they'd hoped to reach. They haven't reached it yet, but increasingly they are spending more money. And this could be tremendously significant. There were 2 speakers at Dublin from the Healthspan, from Hevolution. The CEO, Mahmoud Khan, at the last minute was called away on other personal business, but his chief of investment was there and gave a very interesting talk. And also separately, another one of their scientific advisors who also works for one of the leading consultancies in the US. He gave a fascinating talk about the economics reasons why we should all be getting behind healthy longevity. So I'm encouraged by what Revolution are doing so far. I wish they would spend more money more quickly, but they are building up speed, I think, and their backing of the XPrize is truly significant. Victor, I wonder if anything you want to add, because you have been watching Evolution from your own point of view.
Yes, thank you, David. I don't think Victor is on the stream at this time, but if he does return, we can ask him this question, and I definitely appreciate your overview, both of Peter Diamandis' comments on the XPrize Healthspan, as well as the activities of Evolution and the remarks by William Green, who was present in person. He is the Chief Investment Officer of Evolution. So another theme that was addressed at the Longevity Summit is jurisdictional innovation. So as we know, because we held our salon with Augmentation Limitless, who now have an affiliate in Roatan, the island of Roatan in Honduras, there is now a special economic zone there called Prospera. And I had the occasion to interview two gentlemen. One of them is Trey Goff from Honduras Prospera Inc., which is the entity that set up Prospera as a special economic zone. And another individual is Pedro Henrich, who is one of the founders of Vitalia, which is a city, a pop-up city, an innovative community that is dedicated to life extension. And because of the longevity focus of the summit and our salon, I'm going to play the interview with Pedro first, and then I will play part of the interview with Trey because it was actually quite extensive. We'll see what we can get to during this stream, but you will also be able to find the full interview with Trey on my YouTube channel afterward. But for now, let us hear from Pedro Henrich. He is quite an enthusiastic speaker and supporter of longevity. Pedro, could you please introduce yourself and tell us about your interest in longevity as well as how you became involved with Vitalia?
All right. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk a little bit about Vitalia. My name is Pedro Henrich. I am one of the pioneers in Vitalia, and we are creating a society that aims for the first time in history to get in the same spot, the same place, people that want to shape the future of longevity, of human augmentation. So basically, also getting this input on transhumanism. Our idea is by creating density of highly aligned people, we are able to push forward the frontier of development. We work with biotechs, we work with cybernetics, we work with a bunch of startups that want to get things done and want to actually move the humanity and our capacity forward as fast as possible, because this is pressing and is urgent, and we are living this super interesting time in history that we have the knowledge, the technology, and the willingness to make these things happen. So we're truly glad to be here talking with you a little bit about what you are doing.
Yes, indeed. I'm pleased to be speaking with you as well. And indeed, we live in interesting times, an era of jurisdictional experimentation. So as many of us know, there was a pop-up city called Zuzalu, which was a precursor to Vitalia. And could you perhaps tell our viewers a bit about Zuzalu and also how Vitalia is different, how Vitalia is the next step from that?
All right. So basically, Zuzalu happened last year in Montenegro. It was an initiative spearheaded by Vital Buterin, and it was what we call a city. It's within the lines of a concept called network states. It's to experiment how can we get Web3 ideals Web3 governance tools and frameworks and implement it in the real world. Okay, and this was an initiative that happened for 3 months, if I'm not wrong. And from that initiative, a bunch of enthusiasts also continue working on their own projects. Vitalia is one of these projects. Zuzalu is mostly focused on Web3, even though there's alignment with a lot of interesting topics like that go beyond Web3, namely longevity and biotech. But Vitalia itself specialized on this vertical, on biotech and longevity and long bio and life extension. And our goal is to get some of the principles that were implemented in this pop-up city and try it by plugging the concept in what we believe to be the best place in the world that allows us to create a network society, a startup society, a long bio society. That is Prospera in Roatan. So it's a special economic zone that gives us, well, from the Honduran government, that gives us complete freedom when it comes to defining the most appropriate health, legal regulations that leverage and expedite this goal of biotech development. And that's how, so this year in January, for the first time, we had our own pop-up city, Vitalia, that started in the beginning of January. We had amazing thought leaders over there. We had Aubrey, that is hosting one of the most important presence here in Longevity Summit in Dublin. We had Naval Ravikant, we had Balaji, we have Brian Johnson. We had a lot of opinion and thought leaders worldwide that came to visit us, that we did this experiment on what would be to live in a place, how to engineer the paradise that we want to see on Earth. And we were lucky enough to have this amazing traction that worked with us and made Vitalia not only a successful pop-up city, but also allowed us to seed the permanent basis for this permanent community that still exists and is going to keep existing, we hope, forever. That's what we're working on, at least.
Yes, indeed. And one of the most important questions in my mind, apart from how to make individuals live forever, is how to enable good organizations or good societies to endure forever or indefinitely, so that we don't have situations like violent revolutions or disintegrations of society, or societies degenerating into tyranny, which has happened often throughout history. Great empires have collapsed, for example. So do you think Vitalia offers a proof of concept of a society that could endure where previous models have failed?
So let me first clarify something. Our goal, of course, is to work in life extension, but it goes beyond that. We think that life extension is a consequence of health. If you're able to mitigate things like aging, if you're able to focus on being healthy, a side effect is going to be actually not dying, or at least not dying through natural causes like aging or diseases. So our goal is mostly to focus on life expansion, in human augmentation. How can we go beyond our current limitations? So life extension, it's something that we are focused on, but it's one of the side effects, a lot of the side effects that can come. For example, intelligence increase can be also one of the consequences. So answering if we are bulletproof regarding some of the vices that have been haunting societies for millennials, or since humans exist. No, we are not bulletproof. But we are open to experiment and to adapt the best practices that allow us to try to mitigate those possibilities. At the basic level, so if we are able to engineer the new kinds of humans, maybe we are going to have the cognitive capacity to solve problems that we haven't done before. If we're able to invest in AI, a technology that allows us to leverage also our decision-making capacities, we can also maybe find solutions that until now we haven't seen before. But at a more basic level, assuming that these things are still in process, we try to work with tools that are open to the community to engage and contribute in a speedy manner, because through iteration is the best way for it to evolve and to actually build something that is anti-fragile. And right now we do that mostly by aligning with Prospera, and Prospera has been collecting the best practice in terms of the most successful legal structures worldwide, economically. For example, special economic zones like Hong Kong, like Dubai. But we go beyond that because we also focus on the human aspect of liberty. So, and for that we have been including and even inviting prominent philosophers and economists to contribute on how to paradise engineer these places that we want to build. On a second hand, regarding these two, besides Prospera, we also are employing open source solutions, a lot of them also based on Web3 protocols. And that's something that we think is important to understand from everything that exists. So Web 2, Web 3, Web 4, or Web whatever is going to come, we are not stuck into a single philosophy when it comes to what are the best ways to create the best society. We are open to the best solutions to optimize for the right and not optimize for to an ideology. So anyone that wants to come, anyone that wants to contribute, anyone that believes that has an interesting solution, we invite for people to come. We have radical tolerance. We believe that only by exposing our current beliefs and our current ideals, our current basis of operation to external challenges, external ways of thinking that may try to change and try to deconstruct some of the things that we are creating right now, is the only way that we actually can do something more sustainable. So by operating and integrating everyone that is willing to contribute, that's how we create an anti-fragile society that tries to mitigate some of these issues that we're trying to solve.
Very interesting. So it's possible that Vitalia will become a hub of new political theory and experimentation, similar to what happened during the 18th century in Europe and in the United States, where essentially new Republican or small d democratic forms of government were devised. And prior to that time, much of the world was comprised of monarchies. So maybe still newer political structures and policy frameworks will be devised in Vitalia through these collaborations, through various thinkers coming over there and sharing their ideas. Now, I wonder, in your view, what are some of the policy reforms that Vitalia would be able to implement that could streamline, for instance, the discovery of new medical treatments or the deployment of those treatments to patients who might benefit them?
So we believe in several things. We think that the best person for you to talk a little bit about the legal innovations are going to be the ones from Prospera, some of our partners. But we in Vitalia, we are leveraging some of these legal frameworks, mostly those that allow us to, for example, expedite the go-to-market of biotechs from 10 years and billions of dollars to less than 1 year and hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a completely change of paradigm, because what happens is, first of all, you allow for companies to start monetize in really earlier stages. So for any kind of researcher or scientists or entrepreneurs that actually want to start doing something in this field, now they have an option. Because to become an entrepreneur on an industry that might require 10 years to do something, well, that's not quite attractive. And we believe that by changing this paradigm, we are going to incentivize a potential revolution in terms of the creation of new biotechs, new cybernetics, new ideas in the realm of biology that can change completely the way we operate. We also, regarding new regulations also, we believe that this is done, and this is important for us to focus a little bit. So we are able to shorten this process because we are most focused on safety. So the efficacy trials are not one of our main concerns, because we believe that's one of the main concerns of of the companies providing the solutions, and they are liable for these solutions. And within the legal system that we create, they can be litigated, they can be a target of being sued if they're not doing with what they are promising. Anyone from the community can do that. But our main focus regarding a government entity is to guarantee safety. So by focusing on the safety aspect of these trials, we allow that we guarantee that everything we're doing is actually safe for everyone to implement. And this allowed, with also the possibility of the right to try, well, enables us to eliminate one of the main causes of death right now, is the slowness, this pace of development that we don't see the effect on our daily lives, because everyone thinks about the people that are saved by a drug when it's wrongly administered. For example, if something happens regarding a new treatment, we can see the effects of it being done in a poorly manner. What we don't see is the silent symmetry of people that die because a lot of these solutions didn't go to market so fast. So some studies say that in 10 years, hundreds of thousands of people can be, tens of thousands, of people are saved by FDA regulations regarding safety. What we don't see is the hundreds of thousands, or maybe even millions of people that die because the solution was not put into the market fast enough. And our goal is to create this system that fuels, that allows for people that have problems that need to be solved urgently, because when you are diagnosed with something that may kill you, safety is important, efficacy of course is important, but to have something that you want to implement and to try to save your life, that's the key thing that we're trying to solve over here. And our goal is not to replace the system completely regarding safety, of course. We are not, we believe that we need to find ways to collaborate with existing governing bodies, but what we want to do is first allow for these solutions to go to market super fast, and then by providing these solutions that can be used by any kind of person, we're also producing data that can then also expedite the process through traditional means by collecting data and proving what is being done is actually successful and useful and can be implemented through a more traditional mean of approval.
Yes, indeed. And we in the U.S. Transhumanist Party strongly support the broadest possible right to try, not only because of our strong support for patient autonomy, but also because of this data collection element that you mentioned. The best way to collect data about the efficacy of a treatment is to see it deployed in real-world settings. Sometimes the phase 3 clinical trials are too controlled to account for all of the variability that happens with actual patients. Now, for those who would like to get involved with Vitalia, what are some of the opportunities that are available? How can people do more to either collaborate with you or even to come over there?
So all this information is in vitalia.city. We have a website. We are on X. You can also contact me through enrich.ai. But the best way for you to get involved is get yourself there. Come to visit us. And we are organizing events throughout the year. Usually we do summits, we do workshops. Right now in July, we are going to have our acceleration sprint, where we're going to organize 3 summits in 1 month. Bioaccelerationism, a surprise one that is going to be announced soon, and Human Augmentation Summit. What happens is we are going to have experts from these areas coming, contributing to this field and showing you how can you actually be a part of this movement and what are the amazing new developments emerging in the area. Besides that, we have, while these summits are happening, we have this acceleration sprint program that brings startups that want to either they are in early stages, they don't want to get something from the ideation stage to something palpable, something physical, and they aim to get an idea to a business plan, to an action plan, to a fundraising plan, learn how to pitch and to get something rolling so the idea can start getting the attention that they require to move forward, this is one of the targets that we can come over here, join us. We're going to have workshops with industry experts. We're going to get you ready to start your startup journey. Additionally, if you are a company going through clinical trials, seed stage, Series A, we're also going to use this acceleration period to help you employ the mini circle framework, the Prospera framework that allows you to shorten this go-to-market from 10x. So from 10 years to 1 year, from billions to hundreds of thousands. So it's amazing for startups. Also, if you just want to get things done, well, just come and join us because we are a society that aims at getting things done. So if you want to get the work that you would do in 3 or 4 months in 1 month, well, we have an amazing accountability and deep work group that we do things together. And we're also implementing something we call the Vitalia protocol. The Vitalia protocol aims to implement the best techniques of productivity and deep work, implement the best techniques for health, so working out, we're talking about nutrition, talking about sleep protocols, and we use a third pillar that is based on technology to leverage all these kind of things, from AI assistance to second brains to therapy tech to all these things and cybernetics that can enhance our capacity. So either if you are a startup, either if you are curious, we are organizing these things all over the year. And in July, it's going to be an amazing place to try all these things in a tropical island. So the second biggest coral reef in the world, where you can come, enjoy, get things done, and become a part of this movement that aims to push forward the frontier of human capabilities.
Yes, this is all extremely intriguing, both from a broader standpoint of accelerating progress, as well as from the standpoint of creating an environment that really catalyzes personal improvement and productivity and good health, good habits. So, Pedro, thank you very much for speaking with us today. One last question for you, since you've been here now for 3 days at Longevity Summit Dublin. What are your impressions of this event?
Well, this event gives me a lot of hope on an industry that it's good to see that people are taking seriously the possibility to eliminate aging. That aging is a disease, and we are getting our resource together, and we are getting this amazing intellectual capacity aligned to, well, fight one of the main challenges of humanity. So for me, it's super grateful and super inspiring to be in this environment with such amazing people. So I'm really glad to be over here, and I'm really glad to get to know you also.
Yes, indeed. I'm very happy that you were able to attend and to have met you, because certainly our causes are quite aligned, and I wish you the best of success with Vitalia.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so that was Pedro Henrich, and he did wish that we all live long and prosper at the end of that interview, which I appreciated. And he also referred me to Trey Goff of Prospera Honduras, Inc. Today, we are only going to have time to show a portion of our interview with Trey, but we do get into enough of the details about how Prospera operates that I think this will motivate quite an interesting discussion. And then the remainder of the interview will be accessible from my YouTube channel soon. So now let us hear from Trey Goff. He is quite fascinating as well. Hey, it's a pleasure to speak with you today, and you just presented on Prospera. So for our U.S. Transhumanist Party audience, could you describe briefly the concept of a special economic zone in Honduras and some of the history of Prospera?
Absolutely, no problem at all. Thank you so much for the conversation. So Prospera is a special economic zone off the coast of Honduras on the island of Roatan. What that really means is you can think of it kind of like a municipality, okay, in the United States, except this particular municipality has a number of degrees of freedom, has a significant amount of autonomy from the central government's legal and regulatory environment. We're operating under a constitutional amendment that the Honduran Congress passed back in 2012 and 2013 that effectively enables us to work closely with the Honduran government to form a brand new legal and regulatory system within this special economic zone to rapidly catalyze economic development and create prosperity for Hondurans and unleash innovation for entrepreneurs that look to operate in the jurisdiction. Prospera was founded back in 2017. We were the first formally approved ZEDE. We spent almost 2 years working very closely with the Honduran government and international legal and governance experts to build our governance and regulatory environment to make sure it was based on best practices from around the globe and that it would maximize prosperity and economic freedom and therefore the ability to operate businesses within the jurisdiction. We've been operating for a few years now. We're over 1,000 acres in size now. We have a number of buildings and companies that are operating inside the jurisdiction right now, especially focused on the cutting edge of biotech, longevity, and things that are very compatible with the kind of transhumanist movement as a whole.
Yes, indeed. And we in the Transhumanist Party certainly welcome jurisdictional experimentation. One of our interests, apart from making individuals live longer, is to enable societies to last longer without descending into either chaos or tyranny. So what are some of the ways in which Prospera might help to fulfill that aim and hopefully itself endure for an extremely long time?
Absolutely. I love this question. So let me start at the meta level for a second, speaking both kind of more personally here. One of the most important things about Prospera is that we are catalyzing competition in governance, right? Governance is a service that is currently provided by public entities, what we think of as political entities, right? But governance in and of itself is a service. It's simply setting the rules of the game, enabling fair dispute resolution, and setting the rules by which people interact within a jurisdiction. One of the most important things that Prospera is catalyzing is a new competitive industry for governance as a service, right? We are one of the first movers in this industry. There are a number of other companies that are doing it right now. But our end goal, even if, again, at a meta level here, even if we don't survive, but 20 years from now, there are 1,000 new jurisdictions trying and experimenting with new, better forms of governance that I will have considered us a wild success in any case, right? The objective here was to catalyze this entire new industry of governance as a service to create competition for governance such that it improves rapidly over time, the same way any other industry that is exposed to competition in the marketplace improves over time. Now, Prospera specifically has been structured to last effectively forever. This is because we have a kind of our legal structures, if you will, are two-tiered. There's two separate legal entities. We have the Prospera ZEDE, which is the political entity. Again, this is the municipality I was mentioning earlier. It's the political legal jurisdiction, right? And then we have Honduras Prospera Inc., which is a Delaware C Corp. It's an American company. It's the operating company, right? We provide the capital and a lot of the funding and the actual kind of work to start the jurisdiction. And that means we kind of set the initial rule set. Over time, our governance evolves to have more citizen input in such a way that we can ensure that the short-term interests of the jurisdiction are balanced with the long-term interests. I'll give you one concrete example of this because I know that's a little abstract. The composition of the Prospera Council is a 9-member council. It's the governing entity of the jurisdiction. Okay? 5 of those council members are democratically elected by the residents, but 4 of them are appointed by the promoter and organizer of the jurisdiction, which is Honduras Prospera Inc. The reason for that is because almost everything substantial, meaning any statute or regulation or anything like that, requires a 2/3 majority vote of the council. What that means is you have the frankly short-term focus, which for good and for ill, democratically elected members of the council who are focused on kind of the short-term benefits for their residents and for their constituents, counterbalanced with the much longer-term view of Honduras Prospera Inc. as a private company, which wants to grow as profitable as possible for as long as possible, right? To be a multi-century extant company, effectively. So you have a balance of forces on the council where for any given piece of legislation and an important act to be done or passed, you have to have a balance of these interests, of the short-term interest and of the long-term interest. We're also the first jurisdiction to implement something called double democracy, which effectively means, the way this works mechanistically, anything the council passes, the residents have the right to immediately veto via referendum within the 60-day window after that legislation is passed. They do this via a referendum that has to have a certain vote threshold. However, this effectively gives them a way to stop very bad legislation. Somehow, some way, the council becomes misaligned with the interests of the residents. They have the ability to stop that bad legislation in its tracks. However, they cannot create new legislation through referendum, which is often a mechanism for majority rule in a very bad way, effectively. So we're the first jurisdiction to implement this innovative double democracy model as just a few examples of how we've ensured the long-term political and legal stability of the jurisdiction.
Yes, this is very interesting. So it's kind of a mixed democratic model with small d democratic veto power. Usually veto power is held by an executive, but you've kind of inverted this, which is quite interesting as well. And I can see essentially how this would work from the standpoint of protecting individual rights, because this democratic veto power would be particularly inclined to be exercised in situations where a majority might perceive a certain vital right as being infringed upon. However, the lack of ability to propose positive legislation by referendum could prevent policies that, for instance, would redistribute wealth from one group of people to another.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. I mean, you can imagine, like, let's imagine for a second a worst case scenario, right? Let's say far in the future, let's imagine there's 10,000, 100,000 residents in Prospera, whatever the case may be. And for whatever reason, say Honduras Prospera Inc. is no longer controlled by the current group of people it's controlled by. It's been taken over by some hostile actor or whatever. And that hostile actor has somehow, some way forced through some bad legislation, right? They've gotten some bad legislation through the council. Well, because of this double democracy, you effectively have a check against either Honduras Prospera Inc. going rogue, or the Democratic politicians going rogue, or the entire group going rogue, effectively. You can stop anything they do in its tracks very early on, because you have this immediate democratic veto power. It's one of the reasons I hate this so much. There's always these, there's been a few articles written by left-leaning publications who call us authoritarian, colonialist, whatever, but they don't realize, because they never actually read anything that we do, that we're, if you just look at the raw facts, the most democratic jurisdiction in the world, just implemented in a much more thoughtful way to ensure that individual rights are protected over the long term, and that the citizens have a say in how they are governed, but not in such a way that mob rule and majority rule can cause wealth redistribution or other violations of property rights, effectively, and violations of individual rights over time.
Yes, this is quite fascinating. Thank you for that answer. Now, one of the biggest threats to the longevity of an enterprise such as Prospera would be the intervention of the Honduran government in particular. And we know that in 2022, the new administration of Xiomara Castro essentially expressed deep opposition to the special economic zones and tried to shut them down. But you mentioned in your presentation that there was considerable pushback against that, and you believe that you have been successful in preserving the autonomy of Prospera. So could you please discuss more of what happened and why you believe that this threat has been averted for the time being?
Absolutely. I'm going to go in the weeds a little bit here, just because the details really matter. So the first thing to note is that the enabling legislation that allows the creation of ZEDEs is comprised of two parts: a constitutional amendment and a statute, or the ZEDE Organic Law. The constitutional amendment, the way the Honduran legal system works, requires a 2/3 majority vote of Congress, a supermajority effectively, in 2 consecutive sessions of Congress to change the Honduran constitution, to ensure there's not some short-term kind of impulsive action. Now the statute, of course, just being a regular statute, can be repealed at any time by a unilateral simple majority vote of Congress. Well, they almost immediately repealed that enabling law, the organic law. However, the founders and the framers of this system were brilliant, and we had nothing to do with this, to be clear. These were just a few absolutely visionary Honduran politicians and actors. They anticipated that something like this would happen in the legislation. So what happens is, instead of the repealing of the organic law causing us to no longer be able to operate, all that means is no new ZEDEs can be formed. Because all the organic law really did was set out the rules and the system by which new ZEDEs were formed. So no new ZEDEs can be formed, fine, but the constitutional amendment remains intact. The second repeal vote failed, which means it is protected effectively. It is still part of the Honduran Constitution, and as a result, us and the other 2 extant ZEDEs, we're not the only one, can continue to exist indefinitely. Where you could think of it as being grandfathered in effectively, because we were already there, and the constitutional amendment still exists. So that's the first point. The second point is that the Castro administration was also hostile to a number of other private enterprises in Honduras. There's been a lot of news written about this. I'm not sharing any private information here. And there was kind of a grassroots uprising, effectively, welling of support from companies unrelated to us, just other private companies in Honduras, other American companies that have invested in Honduras, because the Castro administration was not friendly to not just us, but a bunch of other private enterprise. So there was a pretty unified pushback by the business sector against many of the things she was doing that has resulted in her losing a considerable amount of political power. And as a result, she's not even running for re-election. And it looks like the opposition party, which is more market friendly, will end up overtaking the presidency in the upcoming presidential election. The third point I want to make is we also had a number of legal protections in place. Because we are a U.S. company, therefore we are party to and protected by CAFTA and a number of other international trade agreements and treaties. And an important part of that is there's a kind of established norm and established in case law, international law, that says basically if a country invites another company from another country to invest in that country, and then based on a certain law, and then they repeal that law, that amounts to an expropriation. You can think of it, if you think of it just company, makes a little more sense. It's like me saying, hey, I will build you a building and with a bunch of specialized equipment in it, and then I build you a building, I don't put any of the equipment in it, right? I just violated our contract, which is obviously wrong and you could sue me, rightfully so. Works the same way. So we have, as a result, sued the Honduran government at ICSID, the International Court of State and Investor Dispute at the World Bank, for violating their treaty obligations under CAFTA and a few other treaties. And that case is going swimmingly, and we anticipate a favorable outcome from that as well. I can't share any details there, but suffice to say the combination of all of these things has resulted in us continuing to operate completely unabated. And importantly, this is kind of our most vulnerable time, right? We're the smallest we're ever going to be right now, so it's the easiest to kind of try to push us over. The fact that we repelled the attack now means that any future attack will not be able to succeed effectively because our growth is extremely rapid. There's a bunch of people and companies setting up in the jurisdiction. And importantly, over 90% of the workforce in our jurisdiction is Honduran, and that will remain to be the case moving forward because, again, we exist to catalyze prosperity for Hondurans through innovation and entrepreneurship. And so because our jurisdiction is majority Honduran, as more companies come, as more Hondurans are employed, that becomes a political and voting bloc of itself that can help to have, again, a grassroots upswelling of support to kind of stop such attacks in the future before they even happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And I agree that with the passage of time, Prospera's position will only become stronger. And I'm glad that you have these multiple layers of protections in place, both from a legal standpoint and the practical reality of the situation in Honduras. I do hope the administration there changes. Now, as a follow-up on that, do you think the culture of the rule of law is strong enough in Honduras that a future administration would not just decide to disregard the law altogether and despite your legal victories, just choose to evict Prospera from the territory of Honduras because it can?
Sure, it's a great question. The short answer is no, I don't see this happening basically ever. Honduran support for the rule of law, while not perfect, is better than you might suspect. And importantly, if you think about this just from a raw kind of just brute incentives perspective, to be honest, doing so would cause them massive harm because it only further strengthens any litigation we might bring against them in international court, which can massively harm them economically if the ICSID arbitration rules against them. And further, because we are a U.S. company, that means by default we effectively have the backing of the U.S. government. And I'm not just saying anything that people don't already know. Like the State Department all the time helps companies in other countries through diplomacy, statecraft, kind of just helping make sure that American companies are able to operate as intended in countries where they're working. The Honduran government is an enormous benefactor of U.S. generosity and a number of things that the United States does for them. So kind of attacking us frontally that way would have, again, I'm speculating here some, but I suspect would drastically, let's say, worsen diplomatic relations between the two countries, perhaps in some tangible ways. I can give you some evidence for this already, in that the United States actually revoked the visas of a few Honduran politicians because of some of the extremely inflammatory things they said and actions they took against not just us, but other American companies. I mean, for example, Dole has massive operations in Honduras for their fruit farms. So it's not just us here, to be clear. So I suspect over the long term that this becomes less of an option as Honduras remains, the importance of Honduran-U.S. relations remains incredibly important.
All right, so I am going to stop the interview here for now, but again, the rest will be up on my YouTube channel. I wanted to provide an opportunity for David especially to offer some thoughts in regard to what has been said. I think we did cover a lot of ground with these interviews.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, and they are to be applauded for the serious thinking seriously about options for organizing more effectively to bring solutions to market without some of the hindrances that have grown up accidentally in some ways or sometimes purposefully. So many people are thinking about alternatives. People can look online for something called Longevity Network State or Longevity State Conference, in which different people have got different ideas. I know Trey is expressing optimism that the site in Prospera and Vitalia will persevere. Other people are saying, well, in case it fails, we can retry some of the same ideas elsewhere in the world. So Lawrence Iron, who is also one of the thinkers and movers behind this particular aspect of longevity, he has a number of other candidate places, some in America, some in Europe, some in Africa and elsewhere, possibly. Some of the people in the conference weren't entirely convinced. They were saying, do you realize if you go too quickly with approvals for new drugs, that can be terribly disruptive? Some doctors said that many side effects from drugs that haven't been properly tried. Other people spoke about stem cell treatments that were outright dangerous and should be prosecuted. There is a Netflix video series, which I recommend, called Bad Surgeon, about a notorious person who was very famous and very well respected for a while, but it turned out his stem cell treatments were nothing like what he claimed. So there is a lot of discussion going on as to how we can get the benefits of innovation without falling foul of free riders, bad actors, and just incompetence. But I think this discussion is going to run and run, and we should encourage it to run and run. We should be creative, and we should be critically thoughtful as well.
Yes, indeed. I think we need to discuss the implications of each of these innovative proposals and brainstorm about possible vulnerabilities, which I did with Trey. And actually, the interview continues in this fashion. We delved quite a bit into the regulatory insurance aspects of Prospera that Trey also briefly mentioned during his presentation at Longevity Summit Dublin. And I think, yes, we need to be open to this kind of innovation, but also thoughtful about possible risks and hopefully averting those risks to begin with. Now, in the last minute and a half or so of the salon, I'd like to invite Ben Ballweg to share any impressions, any feedback that he might have as our Director of Longevity Outreach.
I'm glad you guys heard about that buffalo fish. That's kind of neat, and that's a little bit in my backyard up in northern Wisconsin, border with Minnesota. But any reveal that happened this year? I know last year was Dublin Longevity Declaration. Any other big splashes that happened this year at the summit?
I would say the RMR study update, the robust mouse rejuvenation update, as well as the discussion of XPrize Healthspan constituted the, I would say, soft reveals because people did know about them, but this wasn't as public of knowledge as it became after the summit. But Didier, if you have some comments, please feel free to share. Let's see. I think we might.
So
yes.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mic. Very short. I want to say that concerning gene therapies, there are quite a few things with clinical trials going on. But also, I wanted to make a few general comments before we stop. The first one is there are many conferences going on. And this is quite interesting, more conferences than ever. I have the impression more energy and more interest than ever. But on the other side, we have to know that the longest person ever is not older than a few years ago, and the oldest rat ever is also not older than a few years ago. So things are there is more energy, there is more knowledge, there is more scientific research, but I think that if there is not a big progress concerning artificial intelligence, we are going to wait a while before we can really live longer. And for me, on the, let's say, relatively short term, what is really, really important is that the LEVF is one of the really, really very important things is that the LEVF is getting money for the second experiment on mice, and or that other people are doing other experiments on mice and also on humans, of course. That's it for today. No, I also wanted a general comment that nobody was speaking about that, but maybe some of you know I was kind of especially pessimistic the last 2 years because life expectancy was going down. In Europe, life expectancy is again going up, so that's on the
Nice.
positive side.
Yes. Well, thank you
That's
for
it.
mentioning that positive development, but indeed we need to be concerned about life expectancy not increasing faster. So I do hope Ray Kurzweil is right that Jose's optimism is justified, that we get more AI progress, and that we absolutely get more funding for robust mouse rejuvenation and the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation so that we could all live long and prosper.